The hum of neon lights flickered overhead, washing Isabella in a faded glow as she wiped down tables sticky with spilled coffee and regret. The city outside pressed against the glass, murky and relentless, its rain slicing through shadows and pooling in puddles that mirrored her own exhaustion. Her swollen belly strained against the apron, heavy in ways few understood, each step a reminder she was carrying more than just her own future. The other waitress's laughter echoed from behind the counter, sharp as broken glass, their eyes lingering just a moment too long before flitting away. The smells, grease, old bread, distant cigarette smoke, mingled with the quiet thrum of fear Isabella nursed silently. Hope flickered somewhere inside, fragile but stubborn, a secret she guarded fiercely. But tonight, every glance through the window carried an unspoken ache, a promise caught in uncertainty. Somewhere beyond these cramped walls pulsed a world of midnight power and whispered names, a world to which Isabella was bound, though no one here suspected. Her husband's shadow loomed much larger than the diner's gloom, and as she mopped up the last spill, she wondered how close danger really was. Her eyes darted to the clock, heart hitching in anticipation. The secret she carried, his name, and the safety or violence it might bring, felt heavier than ever. When a strange man paused at the entrance, rain trailing from his coat, Isabella swallowed hard, senses sharpened. What would happen when the quiet lines between her worlds finally blurred? With every breath she hung at the edge, between safety and ruin, tenderness and brutality. Isabella's life was brittle, poised, and about to change, though only fate, and her mysterious, powerful husband, knew which way the scales would tip next. The morning rush spilled chaos across the linoleum, and Isabella moved carefully, her body slow and heavy, but her mind braced for trouble. Through the din of coffee orders and clattering plates, she felt the familiar weight of gazes grazing over her. Brenda, the senior waitress, snarled without warning as Isabella passed. "Maybe next time don't take up the whole aisle, Bella," Brenda jabbed with a bitter smile. Her grumbling wasn't new, but it dug deeper lately, the bulge beneath Isabella's apron becoming an unspoken insult. The customers were no kinder. Mr. Carter, a regular, leered at Isabella as she set his cup down, voice low and oily. "That husband of yours must be some piece of work, letting you slave away like this." She bit back a reply, heart tightening. Whispers rustled along the diner's booths, speculation about Isabella's mysterious spouse mixing with half-truths and envy. Some said she'd been seen in the company of a man too well-dressed for the neighborhood. Others spun tales of midnight phone calls and hushed arguments. The name Luca never escaped her lips. Still, she sensed that the rumor of him somehow made her a magnet for malice. Her compassion remained steady. Isabella greeted each customer with practiced warmth, her smile a shield, voice softening the edges of complaint. As the day wore on, the small annoyances grew bolder. Salt replaced with sugar, cruel jokes about single mothers, deliberate spills forcing her into yet another exhausting stoop. The manager, Donnie, glanced at her swollen belly as though planning its hourly cost. "Every break you take, you owe me," he barked, skipping sympathy and landing somewhere callous instead. Between the rushes, Isabella's only reprieve came when she retreated behind the delivery counter for a breath, feeling the small kicks inside her, reminders of hope beneath the storm. She thought of Luca then, his voice over the phone, promising protection she couldn't ask for. The darkness he wielded like a torch and a sword. The distance between their worlds grew sharper, but her love for him remained her anchor. Still, even that love carried danger, and the staff's bitterness curdled with every mention of the man they feared but didn't know. By late afternoon, the bullying escalated. Brenda accidentally dropped a tray, refusing to clean it, her eyes cold. Isabella knelt to gather the shards. A customer sneered, "Careful, sweetheart. Don't want your kid born on the dirty floor." Her cheeks flushed, but she stayed silent, swallowing pain. That silence was its own kind of defiance. When the boss's son lingered in the doorway, his glance predatory, Isabella's heart picked up pace. She remembered Luca's warning, never show weakness, never invite a threat. But the threat felt nearer now and more real. Her resolve tested as pain rippled through her back and her hands trembled subtly. Brenda's voice cut through the hum. "Think we'll see your hubby today, Bella? Or is he just another ghost?" Laughter followed, sharper than any slap, and for a moment Isabella almost answered, almost let Luca's name slip. She didn't. Instead, she rose straighter, eyes filled with a quiet fire. "I'm married, Brenda. That's all you need to know." A hush fell, tension mounting. Name and gender continuity held steady, a promise and boundary both. At closing, Isabella gathered her things, lingering near the foggy glass, eyes searching for a familiar car outside. The hostility that day had crossed a line, and she felt the threat thicken like smoke. Would tomorrow bring the end of just words? As she stepped into the street, she shivered, unease curling close. She could sense it already. Small annoyances were giving way to something darker. She was no longer just a target of gossip, but a mark for something dangerous. The diner's lights dimmed behind her, and echoing laughter faded, but fear pressed against her spine with a force she couldn't ignore. Somewhere out there, the next challenge waited. The rain was relentless the next evening, hammering the windows as Isabella slipped through the diner's battered door. Her feet squelched in shoes that never truly dried, and she brushed a wet strand of hair from her brow. The air inside felt denser, charged with something beyond humidity, an electric, unsettling tension. Isabella's belly ached, the child within sensing the storm. This night felt heavy, expectant, as if the diner itself was holding its breath. A slow shift began. The regulars replaced by men she didn't recognize. Hunched shoulders, sharp eyes beneath pulled-down hats. She felt them appraise her, words unspoken but weighted. Brenda greeted them with a forced cheer, her gaze flicking to Isabella, resentment, and something more, an edge Isabella hadn't seen before. At the register, Donnie counted coins with deliberate clatter, glancing up only to signal impatience and scorn. Isabella's hands shook as she poured coffee, but her voice stayed soft, her movements careful. She kept her smile even as insults came dressed as jokes. "You think you're better than us? Carrying that mafia bastard's spawn?" One customer jeered loud enough for the room to hear. The laughter was cruel, a sharp slap against her dignity. Isabella steadied herself, refusing to answer, even as her cheeks burned. The bullying rose with every hour. Brenda bumped Isabella aside near the grill, muttering curses as hot grease splattered their arms. Donnie forgot to warn her about a broken step in the pantry, letting Isabella stumble, catching herself just in time, her heart galloping in her chest. Each time she reminded herself of Luca's promise. Stay strong and no one will break you. But words grew teeth. Near closing, the group of strangers grew rowdy, their jokes darker. Isabella cleared their table, tucking a stray napkin away when one stood looming over her. The diner seemed to shrink around them. In one swift motion, he seized her wrist and twisted, breath reeking of liquor and anger. Isabella's body screamed in protest, but she choked down tears, willing herself not to cry out. The others watched, some smirking, some averting their eyes. "Think your husband scares us, girl?" The man spat, his grip tightening. "He isn't here tonight. You're nothing." Brenda watched, arms crossed, and did not intervene. Isabella's innocence, a soft word, a polite answer, had become an insult to them, one they decided to punish. The man shoved her, hard. Isabella staggered but did not fall. She refused to let herself break, even as pain shot through her side. She saw Brenda smirk, Donnie sneer. The world spun briefly, and Isabella fixated on the reason she would not collapse, the life inside her. In the silence that followed, she straightened, eyes level, voice trembling but fierce. "You don't scare me," she whispered. "No one does." That defiance only stoked their cruelty. The man swung a fist at the counter beside her, chips of formica flying. He hissed, "Your time here is done." Isabella felt the child kick, a reminder that she was more than this fear. She refused to show weakness, pressing hope to her heart. When Donnie finally barked, "Enough, out!" it was unclear if he was protecting her or his business. The group left, leaving ugly laughter trailing. Isabella leaned against the wall, chest heaving, eyes rimmed with tears she would not let fall. She gathered the broken glass, hands trembling, yet never letting Brenda or Donnie see her sob or falter. In the aftermath, her innocence felt pierced by more than words. They had touched her, tried to break her spirit. But Isabella clung to the one thing they could not steal: her resolve for her child and for the man she loved. Each breath she took was a promise. She would not be broken, not tonight or any night that followed. As she wiped the blood from her wrist, hiding it beneath her sleeve, an unspoken warning rose inside her. Tonight had drawn a line. Cruelty had come close enough to leave a mark, but Isabella's spirit held. Hope remained, a stubborn ember, burning inside her even as the shadows grew longer, and outside, beneath the lamplit street, the world was changing. Inside her battered heart, she vowed not to let the darkness win. Tomorrow, she knew, would test her all over again. The clatter of the storm faded into a mournful lull as Isabella trudged home, the bruise blooming purple on her wrist hidden beneath her sleeve. Every step echoed with the memory of rough hands and cruel laughter, the night's violence reverberating through her bones. She gripped her umbrella tighter in the rain, wincing at each new ache, conscious of every stranger's glance, as though her wounds were as visible as the shadow in her eyes. Entering the quiet apartment, Isabella peeled her coat from her shoulders, shivering as the hem brushed her battered arm. The space felt colder, emptier. She stuffed her bloodied napkin deep in the trash and ran warm water over her wound, watching the pink swirl and fade. Her reflection caught in the mirror, eyes shadowed, jaw set, a fragile mask barely holding back all she refused to let out. Fear prickled beneath her skin, but not only from the pain. Luca's promise of protection was a double-edged sword. She knew what he was capable of if unleashed, how his rage could burn the world. Her heart galloped with dread as she pictured his reaction, the look of dark fury she'd seen only once before. If he knew, there'd be blood. But if she said nothing and something worse happened, what then? She practiced her story, grimacing at the falseness of it, slipped on the curb, caught herself badly. She tried tones of nonchalance, concealing the tremor in her voice, the secret pressed on her chest, stealing her breath. Hiding from Luca was like holding back the sea, and she shivered at the price of either confession or silence. Morning brought little comfort. At work, shadows clung to the diner's corners. Isabella noticed the stares, the way conversations stopped when she entered. Brenda eyed her with suspicion, lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Rough night, Bella? Looks like your fairy tale life's catching up," she murmured, voice too loud to be private. Isabella kept her sleeves down, relying on her practiced smile, but Brenda saw through it, her gaze flicking to the swollen wrist each time Isabella reached for a plate. Donnie grumbled as usual, his face softer than before, but eyes sharpened with questions he wouldn't ask outright. In the break room, the gossip simmered. Isabella's name danced through the whispered conversations, the word husband always thick with implication. The staff speculated, but she denied everything, making her world smaller with each fib. Loneliness pressed in, heavier than ever. Her days split into before and after. Before the assault, when hope had flickered even through hardship, and after, where every kindness felt edged with pity or curiosity. Still, she pressed on, mastering the art of appearing unbroken, restoring her posture, refusing to limp, never flinching when Brenda or Donnie tested her wounds with prying questions. Yet there were moments when she caught her reflection in the chrome countertop, saw the glint of pain beneath the surface, and wondered how long she could keep up the charade. Each breath was a battle between pride and self-preservation. Back at home, Isabella crafted a fragile peace. She folded herself into the far corner of the couch, knees tucked under her chin, and waited for the key to turn in the lock. When Luca arrived, his eyes searched her face with silent intensity. "Long day?" he asked, voice deceptively gentle. But Isabella felt the subtle force of suspicion in every syllable. She lied smoothly, fingers pressed over the bruise. "Just tired, that's all. The baby makes everything harder." Luca brushed a hand over her hair, concern woven through his touch. Gentle but always a little dangerous. She measured each word, weighing whether to trust him with the truth. The risk wasn't just to herself, but to their fragile world. Scandal could flare and violence would surely follow. Days passed in tense routine. Isabella flinched at loud noises, jumped when a customer reached too quickly across the counter. Brenda's questions sharpened. "You sure nothing bad happened, Bella?" She pressed one afternoon. "Because your husband, if he ever finds out, well, people like that, they don't forgive easily." Isabella chuckled dryly, but fear raced beneath her calm. Her secrets became heavier, breeding new lies each time she opened her mouth. The stress twisted her stomach, making the baby restless. She found herself lingering by the diner's payphone, thumb hovering over the dial. She imagined what would happen if she called Luca, heard his voice promise safety, then pictured the violence his vengeance would unleash. She confided in no one, not Brenda, not the empathetic dishwasher, not even the old woman who always tipped $1 extra and called Isabella dear. Alone beneath the dim lights and clinking glasses, Isabella felt invisible and exposed all at once, her suffering unseen but not unfelt. Isolation curled close as winter. Still, as the bruises faded, her resolve did not. She would not break, but the longer she kept silent, the more danger brewed, inside and out. One night, as Isabella swept the diner's empty floor, the door creaked open, and a shadow paused at the threshold. Uncertainty prickled down her spine. Was this the night her secret unraveled? Would she finally be forced to choose? Confession or silence? Loyalty or self-preservation? The question hung, trembling and alive, poised for an answer she was certain would change everything. The city's pulse thudded beneath Luca's feet as he strode from the curb to his building, senses sharp, mouth set in a grim line. Shadows curled around the marble foyer, and the night doorman lowered his eyes, respectful but wary, as if reading the tension radiating from Luca's frame. Each step up to the penthouse was a silent reckoning. Luca knew the look on Isabella's face wasn't just fatigue or new mother nerves. Her eyes, once luminous with defiance and hope, had shifted, shadows lingering like phantom bruises she wouldn't let him see. He'd built his world on discipline and danger. As a man feared by many, trusted by few, Luca was used to sniffing out betrayal and weakness. But the unease gnawing at him was personal now, cutting deeper than deals gone awry or rivals on the street. Isabella's silence became an alarm. Her laughter fell hollow, her stories timed too precisely, her sleeve always adjusted just so. Luca's mind churned through possibilities. A rival's threat, a staff member's mistake, a test of his control. The urge to protect warred against the knowledge that protection, in his world, too often meant violence. At dinner, Isabella forked salad absently, pausing whenever Luca's phone buzzed. He kept his questions indirect, voice laced with something softer than command. "Anything happen at work lately?" he asked, aware she'd recoil at a direct challenge. "You seem tense." Isabella smiled, lips pale, eyes flitting to the window. "Just busy." Brenda was in a mood. Donnie's cutting hours. Her answer was routine, but Luca heard the ghost in her voice. Luca waited until she slept that night before turning to his trusted advisor, Nico. The conversation was brisk, coded. "Something's off with Isabella. Run checks at the diner. Quietly." Nico nodded, wordless, and vanished into the city's belly. Luca paced the living room, rage coiled inside him. Love demanded belief, but his instincts screamed for action. Meanwhile, Isabella's vulnerability grew more pronounced. She felt Luca's scrutiny like a pinprick in the dark, her every movement calculated. At work, the staff's gossip reached fever pitch. Brenda cornered her by the fridge, eyes narrowed. "You hiding something, Bella?" Donnie's nervous. "Few strangers have been stopping by." Isabella deflected, but suspicion clung tighter, amplified by the staff's unease. Nico reported back. Subtle questioning exposed gaps in Isabella's story. Regular customers had noticed rougher crowds, odd marks on her wrist, a tremor in her hands. A dishwasher recalled Isabella's quiet tears, swiftly wiped away when she thought no one saw. Luca listened, face hardening, every instinct demanding punishment for anyone who dared harm Isabella. The tension between love and criminal duty grew. Luca traced the lines between his desire to keep Isabella safe and the violence required to ensure that safety. To outsiders, his power was legendary. His word could end lives, move armies. But with Isabella, he was forced to confront a different enemy, the frailty of trust, the limits of love unspoken. He wanted to hold her, soothe her worries, but the world he ruled was unforgiving. If he acted carelessly, the fallout could reach far beyond revenge. Signals of looming retribution flared. At the diner, strangers lingered too long near Isabella. Staff grew restless, tiptoeing around the specter of Luca's reputation. One cook joked, "Heard that Bella's husband is some big shot. Maybe he'll show up and put us out of business." Brenda laughed, but Isabella's smile faded. The threat became real. Every unspoken rumor, every sidelong glance grew heavier. Luca's men shadowed her route home, reporting back every detail. The silence grew louder still. Isabella sensed the change. Luca's love was her anchor, but it had teeth. She saw the way his jaw tensed when she tried to explain away her limp, the steel in his eyes when the subject of work arose. She longed to confide, but fear stitched her lips. Her vulnerability battled with her need for survival. If she spoke, she risked unleashing Luca's fury on a world she knew could never withstand him. The stakes escalated. One night, Brenda pushed Isabella too far, hissing, "You think you're untouchable with that husband of yours? Some of us aren't afraid of shadows." Isabella retreated, heart pounding, preparing for the worst. That evening, Luca met her at the door, eyes burning. "Enough lies," he whispered, voice soft but cold. "Tell me who hurt you." Tears slipped down Isabella's cheek, but she shook her head, still afraid of the cost. In the following days, Luca's presence at the diner was felt but not seen. Threatening calls rattled management. Tips doubled overnight. Donnie sweated through shirt collars. Brenda snapped at anyone who mentioned Isabella. Luca's power pressed at the edges, invisible but undeniable. The contrast between their worlds sharpened. Luca's cruel domain, the backrooms, the deals, the silent enforcers, clashed violently with Isabella's small acts of compassion and exhausted hope. She patched wounds with kindness. He wielded justice with retribution. When Isabella finally met Luca's gaze and whispered, "I need help," the divide shuddered, cracked, but did not collapse. The escalation was palpable now, the air thick with what was coming. Isabella felt a new threat looming, and every instinct screamed to survive, not just for herself, but for the life inside her. Luca moved to embrace her, whispering, "No one will ever touch you again." His promise was both solace and warning, a thread tying Isabella's vulnerability to the violence that kept her world intact. That night, as she rested in Luca's arms, Isabella knew that her secret world had drawn the eye of something unstoppable. The retribution Luca would unleash was already thundering in the distance. All that remained was whether it would bring salvation or destruction. Their love found itself teetering on a knife's edge, the city's heartbeat echoing the danger rushing closer. The days ahead would be a reckoning, and Isabella was poised at the intersection, fragile in body, but more determined than ever to ensure her truth was not swallowed by cruelty or erased by vengeance. Luca had always known when something was about to break. The air seemed sharper, the world less forgiving, as if watching for the cracks in foundation he'd spent a lifetime building. Tonight he felt it in his bones, a new kind of tension, urgent and raw. He watched Isabella across their dim-lit living room, her hands curled protectively around her swollen belly, her face pale under the lamp's hush. Even her laughter sounded bruised, her silence louder than complaint. For days, Luca's questions had circled Isabella like wary birds. Each answer another stone added to a wall only she could see. He studied her the way she walked, slower, shoulders drawn. When she finally met his gaze, he saw more than fatigue. He saw the shadow of betrayal, pain she'd tried to outmaneuver. His heart clenched around the truth. Someone had crossed a line, and Isabella bore the scars. He waited for her to fall asleep, then made a call with hands that trembled less than his heart. Nico's report arrived before dawn, precise and damning, a string of details, names whispered by terrified waitresses, customers who'd seen more than Isabella realized. The bruises hidden beneath her clothes, the way she flinched from certain men. The diner had become a playground of cruelty, a stage for her suffering. Luca's protective rage surged. He pictured the hands that had left marks on Isabella, the hate-filled jeers she'd endured. His mind spun scenarios, revenge so swift and blinding, it would erase the offenders from memory. Yet he fought the urge, knowing violence solved some problems but spawned new ones. He sat in the darkness, wrestling his impulses, love waging war against his criminal need for control. When Isabella woke to Luca's silence, fear sizzled in the air. She moved towards him, body aching, voice soft. "You're up early." Luca's reply was measured. He refused to let anger fracture what was delicate. "Did someone hurt you?" he whispered. Isabella hesitated, her breath caught between denial and confession. She flinched as his fingers traced the bruise she'd tried so hard to hide. Her cheeks flushed. "It's nothing, just work." In that moment, denial felt safer than truth, but Luca's patience had run thin. He reached for her gently, voice trembling. "I know about Brenda, Donnie, the men at the counter. I know what they did." Shock chased fear across Isabella's face. She crumpled, tears hot and shamed. "I didn't want you to worry. If you get involved—" She stopped, dread and relief tangled in her words. The revelation fractured the morning calm. Luca's emotional explosion burst forth, a torrent of love and rage. "You're mine, Isabella," he vowed, arms braced around her trembling body. "I vowed to protect you. How could you think their cruelty is greater than my promise?" His words shook, not just with outrage, but with heartbreak. Isabella let herself cry then. Years of resilience folded into this moment. She confessed it all. The humiliation, the threats, the touches that felt as if they'd scrawled hate into her very skin. Luca listened, fierce and silent, the world narrowing to her pain. When she finished, the room hung heavy with unshed vengeance. Fear mingled with relief in Isabella's chest. She'd carried so much alone, yet telling Luca felt like stepping into the unknown. What violence would her truth unleash? Would she lose herself to a world that could swallow innocence? Could Luca stay her husband, not just her avenger? His protective rage became an engine, unstoppable. Luca mapped out quiet retribution. Calls to contacts, coded messages returned. Voices in the night confirming what must be done. The offenders would not walk away, not anymore. Yet he turned back to Isabella, seeking permission in her eyes. "If I handle this, you walk away clean. You never look back," she trembled. "And if they find out who I am?" Her fear wasn't just for herself now, but for the child within, and even for Luca. But his answer was simple. "I won't let anything touch you. Ever again." The day spun onward, Isabella's world shifting at the seams. At the diner, tension crackled. She sensed eyes following her, whispers sharpening as word trickled through unseen channels. Brenda kept her distance, Donnie mumbled apologies. The cruel customers vanished, replaced by cautious, wide-eyed patrons. The staff felt the change and grew skittish. A rumor swelled that Isabella's husband wasn't only powerful, he was ruthless, capable of anything. For Isabella, the transition from denial to revelation was a mosaic of emotions. She felt new freedom in her honesty, the weight of secrecy loosened at last. But every hour, new doubts surfaced. Was Luca's vengeance really what she wanted? Would she lose control, become an accessory to violence, marked not only by past pain, but what her husband would now do in her name? Luca grew colder, methodical, but beneath the armor Isabella saw the man desperate to save her. "Promise me you'll stay safe," he said, voice trembling. "Just for now. Let me be the one to fight," she promised, uncertain but willing to trust. By dusk, a bouquet of white lilies appeared on the diner counter, honor among threats, a sign from Luca's world that lines had shifted. Isabella's co-workers glanced away, suddenly polite, but fear pooled inside her. She waited, breath tight for the storm Luca was assembling. The city's rhythm felt unfamiliar, as if she'd crossed into a place she could never leave behind. Her relief was short-lived. Questions kept her awake. Would Luca's retribution solve everything, or would it pull her deeper into a life spiraling beyond her control? Isabella grieved the loss of innocence, hoping against hope that her husband's love would not trap her in a cycle of violence and secrecy. But as she lay beside Luca, heartbeat syncing with his, she knew that whatever storm was coming, she would face it as herself. Strong, scarred, and unwilling to break. Outside, the city braced for what came next, and Isabella, caught between fear and strength, readied herself for the reckoning her truth had unleashed. Luca refused to let another shadow pass over Isabella. That morning, he made the call. She would not return to the diner, not even for a goodbye. "Pack your things," he said softly, voice firm with promise and warning. Isabella lingered in the cramped apartment, heart a storm of relief and regret. The place was all she'd known, memories etched into its peeling wallpaper, and the hum of early dawns. But fear drowned nostalgia. Luca's men stood discreetly outside, sentinels against further harm, and Isabella understood the world had shifted. Safety now meant surrendering control. His home was fortress and sanctuary. Guards roamed the silent marble halls, their faces unreadable, their presence constant. Yet within Luca's embrace, Isabella found the rare peace she'd longed for. The quiet, elegant rooms, a sunlit kitchen with warm bread waiting, walls echoing safety rather than violence. She sank into plush cushions, letting herself breathe for the first time in days. The tension in her shoulders ebbed, replaced by the tremulous space of recovery. During those first hours, Luca was gentle, careful. His anger simmered beneath the surface, but his hands knew only tenderness. Isabella watched him move, always scanning windows and doors, his love transformed in its caution. He sat beside her, tracing circles over the soft rise of her belly. Voice low, "You're safe now, my love." But the anticipation of vengeance hovered. Each quiet moment threatened to rupture at any sign of danger. Against the hush, Isabella began to speak. She traced her story for Luca, childhood rough in a chilly town, dreams crumpled by circumstance, an adolescence spent hiding her softness from the world. "I learned early never to ask for help," she confessed, eyes wet. "You came into my life and offered something no one else had, a way out." Her words tumbled, halting but true. Luca listened, heart aching, realizing how deeply her instincts for secrecy ran. Luca pressed her gently for more. "Why didn't you tell me about the attacks?" Isabella hesitated, shame flickering in her gaze. "I wanted to protect you too. Your name, what it carries. Maybe if I endured, things would work themselves out." The confession hung between them. The contrast was sharp. Isabella's need to preserve peace battled with the inevitability of Luca's world, where peace was merely the absence of retribution, not its triumph. The days grew slower, routine stitched from gentle meals, long walks in sun-dappled gardens and tender evenings on the quiet terrace. Yet beneath every lull throbbed a tension. Luca worked late, whispers of retribution flowing through closed doors and coded phone calls. Isabella watched him from the window, knowing some lines, once crossed, could never be redrawn. Intimacy deepened in their sanctuary. She confessed her fears, the terror that vengeance would change him, that once gentle hands might become instruments of wrath. Luca promised, "I'll always protect you, but I'll never let this darkness swallow us whole." The promise felt delicate, but for Isabella, it was enough. They lay entwined as the city slumbered, sharing secrets that had lived too long in silence. More, Luca revealed the depth of his own vulnerability. He spoke of the price of power, the peril of loving anything fragile in a world built from steel and secrets. "I fear losing you more than I fear any enemy," he murmured. His admission warmed Isabella, drew her closer. She understood now that hiding her pain sprang not only from her own trauma, but from love's complicated desire to shield the beloved from suffering. Guarded yet exposed, peace wrapped around them like fragile glass, always at risk of shattering. Luca's men patrolled outside. Lights glowed in rooms safe from threat, but Isabella felt the anticipation of vengeance gnawing at the edges of tranquility. Each hour she spent in the calm, she knew, was borrowed from the storm that had yet to break. On a golden afternoon, Isabella sat in Luca's study, reading quietly, when a knock interrupted the silence. It was Nico, bringing word from the outside world. Progress had been made. Justice was on its way. The news rippled through the house, a reminder that the haven could only hold for so long before the reckoning returned. That night, Isabella stood at the balcony railing, gazing past gardens to the city's distant sprawl. She pressed Luca's hand in hers and spoke softly. "I want this to last. But I know it can't. I hid the truth out of love. But no secret stays safe forever." Luca kissed her brow, voice steady. "We face what comes together." Wrapped in each other's arms, they found solace. But sleep came heavy with anticipation. Tomorrow would bring decisions and danger. For now, their brief sanctuary pulsed with warmth, bracing them for the vengeance waiting just beyond the gates. Sanctuary was never permanent in Luca's world. By midweek, its walls felt less like protection and more like a prelude to battle. The syndicate's business was restless, a new whisper of betrayal threading among Luca's lieutenants, rival ambitions flaring in the vacuum created by his preoccupation with Isabella. In the living room, encrypted phone calls echoed across marble, words clipped and heavy with threat, deals undercut, alliances tested, enemies emboldened by rumors of weakness. Isabella sensed the shift before Luca spoke it aloud. She found him at dawn pacing the study, eyes clouded, body taut with unspent violence. "I need you safe," he said. But there was an edge in his voice, a frustration he couldn't mask. "Some think I've gone soft. They're circling." His hands trembled as he poured coffee. The mafia boss now looked less untouchable, more human, and the vulnerability made her love burn and worry cut deeper. Across the city, the villains from the diner saw their moment in the chaos. Brenda grew bolder, snide remarks leaking to outsiders. She stoked rumors. Isabella was hiding, her husband's reach only rumor now, the darkness receding from the world, ripe for punishment. Donnie, greedy and nervous, toyed with blackmail, clutching scraps of information that could expose the truth to the syndicate's rivals or the police. The safe bubble Isabella had drawn around herself and Luca threatened to rupture, every secret another crack in the armor. Inside Luca's home, Isabella faced a dilemma. More guards arrived. Meals grew cold as strategy meetings ran late into the night, and Luca's men lingered by windows with uneasy glances. "Some want justice," Luca confided, "but others want blood. Or worse, weakness." The struggle was clear. If Luca leveraged all his force, he'd win, but the cost would be Isabella's peace, anonymity, and perhaps her soul. That night, Isabella sat across the wide dining table, feeling the weight of eyes she couldn't see, choices she couldn't avoid. Luca wanted her hidden, protected, a treasure the world would never touch. But Isabella saw the cost in his tense jaw, the circles under his eyes, how his power made him both loved and feared. She realized she could not hide forever, nor could she let her silence destroy him, or those innocent staff who had tried to help her through small kindnesses. The syndicate pressured Luca for answers. Trusted lieutenants tried subtle manipulation, couching threats in praise. "You're distracted, boss," Nico warned. "Our enemies see it. Too many questions, too much noise. Either you send a message or the wolves come for all of us." Luca clenched his fists, fury barely leashed. He wanted only to shield Isabella, but Nico's words were truth. Power demanded action. Loyalty required sacrifice. Isabella's own sacrifice grew urgent. She saw that her anonymity, her quiet, unremarkable former life, was a shield grown thin, almost useless. If she stayed hidden, the violence would escalate unchecked. If she stepped forward, spoke her truth, and helped Luca target those responsible, justice could be swift and surgical. But public exposure might mean the end of her freedom, painting a target on her back forever. Late one evening, Luca sat beside her, voice rough. "I can end this. But if I do, I need your help, your testimony, your name. These people must know you're protected, yes, but also strong. It's not fair to ask, but it's the only way." Isabella stared at her reflection in the window. rain streaking down panes. She remembered every threat, every kindness ignored, every moment her dignity was torn away. The thought of speaking, standing before her tormentors and Luca's syndicate, risking her safety, was terrifying. But doing nothing felt more unbearable. She weighed the possibilities. Speak and risk herself, or remain silent and risk Luca, his men, the fragile peace they'd built in sanctuary. Isabella's compassion warred with her fear. Her resilience whispered of the happiness she desired for her child, a world where her courage could be its legacy. She pressed Luca's hand in hers, voice trembling but resolute. "I'll help. I won't let them destroy us, but I won't let vengeance become our story either." The next day, Isabella joined Luca at a clandestine meeting. Nico and 2 lieutenants flanked them in a darkened warehouse, the air acrid with tension. Isabella stepped forward, speaking her story in clear, unwavering tones. She named the men who had hurt her, recounted the days of cruelty endured in silence, and demanded justice, not blind retaliation, but accountability. Some faces in the shadows watched her with awe, others with grim respect. Isabella's sacrifice, her willingness to risk safety and anonymity, sent shockwaves through both Luca's syndicate and the workplace villains. Brenda was summoned for questioning, her bravado withering under Luca's gaze. Donnie panicked, confessing his schemes to save his own skin. The Mafia's justice was swift, but not senseless. Isabella's dignity restored, her role cemented not as a victim, but as a courageous advocate for her own fate. Luca shielded her at every turn, but it was Isabella herself who shaped the outcome. Her strength the engine of retribution, her sacrifice the reason the wolves retreated. As the crisis ebbed, Isabella returned to Luca's embrace, heart battered but proud. She'd traded the comfort of anonymity for the hard-won victory of justice, her story now impossible to erase, her resolve a beacon in the city's constant dark. Peace, when it returned, held the shape of her courage and Luca's undying loyalty. Their sanctuary was altered, no longer just refuge, but a place rebuilt from active choice and shared risk. Isabella's sacrifice, her name, her story, her strength, had drawn the line between history's shadows and the new light of hope. The transition from passive quiet to active involvement was complete. What came next would be shaped by the choices she'd made and the loyalty they'd defended, together, no matter the cost. Storm clouds devoured the city skyline as Luca prepared for the reckoning. For days, every call and coded message had built toward this night, a gathering of judgment and unfinished debts. Isabella watched him from the hearth, heart pounding with dread and hope, knowing justice demanded a price but unsure what mercy could survive Luca's wrath. The warehouse, chosen for its emptiness and echoes, was colder than the autumn wind outside. Luca stood in the center, flanked by trusted men whose faces bore the gravity of those about to witness real violence. Isabella arrived with Nico at her side, the collar of her coat pulled tight, jaw set with determination. She was no longer the invisible waitress, no longer the bruised secret. This was the hour to reclaim herself, and somehow, steer the tide that would decide so much more than her fate. The perpetrators arrived. Brenda, face drained of courage. Donnie wrung out by guilt and cowardice. 3 men whose sneers flickered as they took measure of the room's dangerous tension. Luca's presence was mythic. A man whose power could end careers, lives, or settle vendettas with a glance. His posture proclaimed dominance. His voice cut through the quiet. "You know why you're here." Brenda trembled, her bravado dissolved. Donnie shifted, desperate to avoid Luca's gaze. The 3 men, eyes flickering between Isabella and Luca, sensed a shift they couldn't escape. Luca's criminal code, precise, unbreakable, rooted in loyalty and consequence, hung overhead as the only law that mattered. Yet Isabella's plea for mercy thrummed beneath every word, an undercurrent opposing violence. With icy calm, Luca listed their crimes. "You shamed my wife. You injured her. You trespassed against what cannot be trespassed. Mafia justice calls for punishment. Perhaps for you, Brenda, exile. For you, Donnie, ruin. For the 3 of you, pain." The lieutenants in the shadows nodded, ready to act at a word. But Isabella refused to be a bystander. Stepping between Luca and their tormentors, she faced the crowd, her voice even, her presence undeniable. You think you know power because you've hurt the vulnerable. But mercy is the strongest weapon, and I intend to use it tonight. She caught Luca's eye, a silent plea. Let us be better. Not weaker, just better, silence reigned. The men studied her, uncertain where the lines now lay. Luca's mind raced. Love for Isabella warred against the traditions he'd held all his life. Revenge festered within him, justified by the code, but Isabella's strength bent the room toward possibility. Even his lieutenants shifted nervously, unused to such open-hearted vulnerability. The confrontation sharpened. Brenda collapsed into apology, tears and regret spilling out with confessions of jealousy and hate. Donnie admitted his schemes, begging for leniency. One of the perpetrators lashed out, trying to provoke a fight, but Nico stopped him cold with a threat so smooth it stifled any further insolence. Still, Isabella held firm. You cannot undo what you did to me, but if you face your crimes honestly, there's a path. Let punishment fit the harm, but let it heal as well. Her compassion was the opposite of the Mafia's violence. Instead of retribution alone, she offered restoration, an opportunity to prove themselves changed. Luca's internal battle reached its zenith. He could order their exile, their destruction, their suffering without a word, but Isabella's strength anchored him, offering another choice. One that did not betray his love or his own code, but demanded growth. In her eyes he saw the future she wanted for herself, their child, and the world he ruled. Not soft, not naive, but forged by the courage to change course even at the cliff's edge. He addressed Brenda and Donnie first. You will make reparations, public apologies, restitution, and you leave the diner for good. No harm will come to you if you honor my wife's mercy. To the three men, the threat held, you are finished here, and if you ever approach Isabella again, the consequences will be final, swift, and without negotiation. Brenda sobbed, nodding, her pride broken, but her future unexpectedly spared. Donnie's relief was palpable, but the fear remained, a lifelong reminder where power now truly resided. Luca's lieutenants moved the men out, promises of quiet exiles and new beginnings, always under the eyes of the syndicate. Mafia law would watch, but Isabella's healing had drawn a new line. The room cleared. Isabella collapsed into Luca's arms, trembling under the weight of what it had taken to reach this end. Luca kissed her hair, pride and relief blending with a fear that he had honored her without betraying himself. The love that passed between them was not a fragile thing. It was tested, tempered, made whole again through sacrifice and the refusal to become what they most feared. Isabella's strength transformed the outcome. Revenge, once the only answer, had been moderated by compassion. Luca's own authority was not lessened. If anything, those who had watched saw that his wife's voice carried its own kind of power, one that could change the course of lives. The Mafia's brutality, shown in its restraint, became a legend in itself. In the waking hours that followed, the city seemed lighter. Isabella, once marked for cruelty, now bore the legacy of mercy. The diner rumors faded, replaced by awe and respect. Luca's enemies reconsidered, learning that the man whose heart beat for his wife was stronger, not weaker, for loving her without reservation, and listening when she spoke. Yet the process was not flawless. Some within the syndicate grumbled, unsure if this mercy would undermine Luca's hold. Others embraced it, seeing the wisdom in his choice. Even the villains, faced with consequences but not destruction, carried the lesson with them, fearful of Luca, but forever changed by Isabella's courage. As the hours waned, Isabella and Luca returned home, both battered but more deeply connected. They sat in the quiet, the city's storm abating outside, hands entwined. Isabella glanced at her husband, voice soft. Did we do the right thing? Luca smiled, weariness in his eyes but hope on his lips. We did our thing, and when you speak, I hear you. I always will. The emotionally charged battle was over. Love had tempered revenge. Compassion had healed brutality. Their child would grow in a world forever marked by the choices of this night, where justice was fierce, but forgiveness could flourish, where mafia strength could be measured by restraint as much as by retribution. Thus, the scales tipped, not by violence alone, but by the strength of a heroine whose refusal to break remade the story. And as Luca wrapped Isabella in a protective embrace, the dawn that broke over the city signaled more than survival. It was a new beginning, forged from pain but colored by the healing only love's courage could provide. The city awoke in pale gold as the ordeal's shadow eased. But peace was a fragile thing. Isabella and Luca sat side by side, their apartment quiet save for the soft chime of morning rain against the windows. The world outside had changed. The diner's rumors ebbed, replaced by cautious admiration and wary hush. Yet inside their sanctuary, uncertainty lingered in the space between their words, a weight heavier than any bruise. Isabella traced circles on her swelling belly, eyes unfocused, mind troubled by the unknown. The events of retribution had closed one chapter but opened another. Questions hung unspoken. Was vengeance enough or merely a reprieve? Could justice really keep darkness at bay? Or would their choice to show mercy draw new threats? Here, her strength had changed the rules, but at what cost to their dreams? Luca brewed coffee with careful hands, voice gentle but taut. "It's over," he said, attempting confidence. Yet Isabella heard the tremor of unshed worry. "Brenda and Donnie are gone. I made sure the syndicate will watch. You're safe." But safety was never absolute in Luca's world. It was a fragile peace, dependent on fear and respect, always threatened by ambition and revenge. She watched him for a long moment. "Can I go back to work?" Isabella's fingers twitched with longing. Routine, independence, the comfort of ordinary days. Yet she understood the risk. Even with her tormentors gone, new eyes watched her, curious or dangerous, drawn by the story that stuck to her name. Returning to the diner now would test not only her courage, but the limits of Luca's protection. The staff regarded her with awe, but awe could shift into resentment, a new threat in uncertain territory. Luca hesitated, hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You could," he admitted. "But I worry. We both know being ordinary isn't safe for you anymore. Maybe you choose something new, a fresh start. I can help you find it." Isabella resisted the urge to argue. Independence had always been her lifeline, but the world had changed, and so had she. Could vengeance, even softened by mercy, ever really be sustainable? Or did it only invite more darkness, more enemies eager to challenge what they now knew of Luca's loyalties? Their conversation unfurled over breakfast, each sentence a negotiation between love and survival. Luca wanted her safe, cherished, shielded by his reputation. But Isabella yearned for agency, restless with the thought of being a ghost within his walls while the city spun on, untouched by her story. The aftermath stirred in her chest. She was no longer just the pregnant waitress. She was the woman who stood between mafia law and compassion, who had stared down brute force and bent it to mercy. Tensions rippled beneath the surface. Luca's lieutenants worried. Whispers seeped in from the edges, tales of other rivals testing boundaries, wondering if Isabella's influence foretold weakness in their leader. Yet others admired her, seeing that Luca's strength was not diluted, but transfigured by a love that dared to bend the code. Isabella's defiance, her decision to name her abusers, had not only saved herself, but reshaped the landscape of loyalty and fear. As dusk rolled in, Luca pulled her close, voice low and searching. "Did I do right by you?" he asked. "Not just as your protector, but as a man?" Isabella smiled softly, pressing a kiss to his knuckles. "You listened and you changed. You let me shape my story even when it was hard. That's more than most would ever give." Still, anxieties lingered. What if new enemies emerged, drawn by her reputation, their vengeance fueled by wounded pride? Together they confronted the future, not as victim and savior, but as equals wounded and emboldened by surviving darkness. Luca mapped out options. "We can move, start somewhere clean. Or you can stay, build a new role with my support, but your own terms." Isabella weighed the choices, knowing neither offered absolute safety. But hope stirred. New beginnings, built not from fear, but from the strength she'd earned. A letter arrived at twilight. No return address, unsteady handwriting. Some debts don't vanish, it read. Watch your back. Isabella's pulse quickened, the threat a chilling reminder that wounds could linger even as healing began. Luca read the letter, jaw tightening, eyes flashing. He repeated his vow. No one will touch you. I'll always be here. But Isabella refused to let fear reclaim her. We're stronger now, she insisted. We survived the worst. What comes next we face as partners. Her hand found his, and together they gazed out over the city, hearts beating in time. Shadows in retreat, a new dawn waiting. The darkness had not vanished. But Isabella understood now that hope was not naive. It was earned, forged in fire, made resilient by pain and by love that refused to yield to vengeance alone. As she planned her future, new work, new dreams, or perhaps a return to the diner as a woman transformed, she felt the difference inside her. She was no longer running, no longer merely surviving. Instead, Isabella and Luca faced the unknown with unity. Past wounds had taught them the price of silence, the necessity of courage, the power of love to heal even what was broken by violence and betrayal. Their choices laid the foundation for whatever hope remained, for whatever new enemies threatened, and for whatever peace tomorrow could bring. The city's heartbeat aligned with theirs as they prepared to step into the light of a new beginning. The aftermath of pain had transformed them, not just into survivors, but into architects of their own hope. The future beckoned, shadowed but shimmering with promise, and as the night settled, Isabella knew. In this world, even the smallest light was won by those who refused its extinction. Isabella stood on the apartment balcony, dusk layering the city skyline in lavender and silver. In her arms, the weight of new life pressed gently against her, a living promise of hope, and the future she and Luca had fought so fiercely to preserve. From their vantage point above the restless city, sirens and laughter danced on the wind, familiar music that promised both freedom and danger. For the first time in weeks, Isabella felt peace humming beneath her skin, as if the world had finally paused to let her draw breath. Inside, Luca tidied their living room, whistling low and relaxed, his ever-present worry lines finally smoothing into something like contentment. Pictures of their life together, weddings, crowded dinners, Isabella's radiant belly, glimmered across the mantel. Tangible proof that love's endurance could sometimes outlast even the harshest violence. Together they'd won a fragile safety, dismantling threats with courage and unity, and reimagining family not as sanctuary, but as a force to be reckoned with. Yet as evening folded in, shadows grew long and the city's hush deepened. Isabella's gaze drifted downward, searching the streets for anything out of place. Trust, she knew, was a habit as much as a conviction, rebuilt step by step in each quiet night. Still, she couldn't ignore the ripple of apprehension curling in her gut, a silent warning that not all enemies are vanquished in a single act of bravery. A soft knock at the door startled her. Luca appeared instantly by her side, one arm protectively around her, the other drifting toward a hidden pocket. But it was only Nico, face sober, holding a single unmarked envelope. The envelope was thick, sealed with a smudge of red wax. Isabella accepted it with trembling fingers, her heart stuttering. She read aloud the short typed message. You can never erase the past. We know where you are. Justice is a wheel. It always turns. Beside her, Luca simmered, fury simmering beneath the calm he crafted for her sake. Without hesitation, he called his men, doubling protection, security protocols refortified. But Isabella, standing there in the golden lamplight, realized the cost of the courage she had shown. Safety was not an endpoint. It was a fleeting victory, a lull between storms. Still, fear no longer paralyzed her. She turned the letter over, thoughtful. We knew there would be consequences, she murmured. But we also know this. We aren't alone, and we're not powerless anymore. Luca kissed her forehead, pride and sorrow laced together in his gaze. Let them come. We will always stand together. The next morning, whispers darted through the neighborhood. Some saw Luca's men patrolling discreetly. Others noted Isabella's posture, no longer defeated, but upright, determined. Rumors spread that she was neither victim nor queen, but something altogether new, a woman who had forced the world to reckon with both strength and forgiveness. Her former co-workers watched from afar, uncertain, some bitter, others changed, all remembering the nights when power shifted and mercy, not savagery, prevailed. As Isabella walked through the local market, women nodded to her, small signs of solidarity glittering in their eyes. The past clung, its wounds slow to heal, but community, so long a source of cruelty and isolation, now shimmered with the first light of belonging. She was not naive. The battle wasn't truly over, and the enemy lurking in the shadows would strike again. But she was ready, and so was Luca. Back home, Isabella wrote for herself, something she'd never allowed before. We survived. We changed the rules. If they come for me, they'll find I am not so easily undone. She closed her journal, leaving the page open for herself, for her child, for anyone who needed proof that fear, too, could become a weapon for good. The story's end was only a beginning. Would anonymous threats shatter their peace? Would Luca's past drag them all into new wars? What lines would Isabella draw next, now that safety was won at such a cost? Their family stood at the precipice, scarred but unbroken, still facing forward. Dear reader, what do you think comes next for Isabella and Luca? Will forgiveness truly triumph over vengeance? Or is the next danger already taking root in the darkness outside their door? Is safety ever possible for those who walk with both angels and monsters? Share your thoughts, your hopes, your predictions. Do you crave vengeance? Or does this new legacy of mercy move you to see the path ahead differently? Would you walk away or stand and fight? Let us know in the comments below if you need their story to continue. Do you want to see what happens in part 2? For now, the door stands open, and every shadow is a possibility. In Isabella's heart, one truth remains. Sometimes, the bravest thing of all is believing that happiness, no matter how hard won, is worth defending to the very end. And as another night settles over the city, the next chapter waits. Danger prowling, hope undimmed, and the story far from finished.